Many people assume that cravings are a sign they're doing something wrong. They find themselves reaching for sugar, bread, chips, chocolate, cereal, or other comfort foods and wondering why their sense of discipline seems to disappear. But what if craving isn't a lack of willpower at all? What if it's actually a clue? In this episode, we're going to explore what cravings may be trying to tell you about blood sugar, stress hormones, fatigue, emotional depletion, and the hidden needs that often sit underneath the urge to eat. One of the patterns I see most often in people living with chronic and serious illness is that cravings become stronger precisely when the body is under more stress, not less. Sometimes that stress is caused by unstable blood sugar. Sometimes it's under eating earlier in the day. Sometimes it's stress hormones asking for quick fuel. Sometimes it's exhaustion. Sometimes it's sadness, loneliness, grief, anger, boredom, or the need for comfort. Sometimes it's the brain reaching for reward because the rest of life has become so difficult. During chronic or serious illness, cravings can become even more intense because the body is carrying more strain. There is more fatigue, more uncertainty, more physical demand, more emotional burden, and less reserve available to cope with it all. Food can become one of the quickest ways the body tries to create relief. This doesn't make you weak, undisciplined, and it certainly doesn't mean you're failing. It simply means your body is trying to communicate something important. A craving is not just a random desire for food. It's often the body attempting to solve a problem. If you're new here, this is Renegade Remission, where I break down stories and strategies that help you heal faster, feel better, and live longer, regardless of your diagnosis and prognosis. One of the reasons I wanted to cover this topic today is because cravings rarely occur in isolation. Many people notice that cravings intensify during certain seasons of life. They become stronger after a difficult diagnosis, during treatment, during grief, after a poor night of sleep, when symptoms are flaring, when stress is high, when pain is worse, or when the body is simply exhausted from carrying too much for too long. In clinical nutrition and psychology, this pattern makes sense. People under stress crave foods that are quick, energy-dense, and rewarding, especially foods high in sugar, refined carbohydrates, fat, or salt. These foods can change how we feel quickly, at least temporarily. They provide rapid glucose, they stimulate reward pathways, and they create a short-lived sense of comfort, relief, or pleasure. This can be advantageous and effective, but the problem is that the relief is often temporary. If the craving was driven by low blood sugar, emotional depletion, poor sleep, or chronic stress, then the food provides a brief improvement without addressing the underlying need. The cycle repeats not because the person lacks discipline, but because the original problem was never solved. So the shift can begin when we stop asking, how do I overcome this craving, and start asking, what is this craving trying to tell me? One of the most common biological drivers of cravings is blood sugar instability. When meals are too light, too far apart, too low in protein, too low in fat, or too heavily dependent on refined carbohydrates, blood glucose can rise and fall more dramatically throughout the day. The brain depends heavily on glucose, and when glucose availability feels threatened, the body begins pushing you towards quick sources of energy. That is why low blood sugar cravings often feel urgent. You are suddenly and desperately reaching for crackers, candy, cereal, toast, juice, chocolate, or anything capable of raising blood sugar quickly. During illness, this becomes even more intense because energy regulation is often already under strain. Most people assume they're craving sugar because they have a sweet tooth or they love sugar. I hear this all the time. But in practice, some of the strongest sugar cravings have very little to do with taste and a lot to do with physiology because the body is trying to correct its perceived fuel shortage. This is one reason cravings improve when people begin eating more consistently and pairing carbohydrates with protein, fat, and fiber, because the craving wasn't simply a desire for sugar, it was a desire for steadier fuel. We also need to understand that stress changes appetite. When the body perceives a threat, the stress response mobilizes energy. Cortisol helps raise blood glucose, alters insulin sensitivity, and influences hunger and reward pathways. In acute stress, some people temporarily lose their appetite. But under ongoing stress, many people experience stronger cravings for highly rewarding foods, particularly foods rich in sugar, fat, and refined carbohydrates. From the body's perspective, stress means increased demand, and increased demand means increased fuel needs. And fast fuel becomes especially appealing when the nervous system is activated. If your body has been living in a chronic state of stress because of illness, it makes perfect sense that the brain would begin seeking reliable sources of relief. The challenge is that sugar and refined carbohydrates, while providing temporary relief, also contribute to the next wave of instability. They raise blood sugar quickly, but that rise is followed by a drop. It increases dopamine temporarily, but then that feeling fades. So they may help you get through the moment, but they don't resolve the underlying stress chemistry, which is why stress-related cravings need you to support your nervous system, because otherwise the body continues asking for food to do the work of safety, comfort, regulation, and recovery. What's interesting is that stress doesn't always create cravings immediately. Sometimes the craving shows up hours after the stressful event has ended, which may explain why people find themselves standing in the kitchen late at night without fully understanding what they're actually hungry for. We also need to understand that cravings are connected to the brain's reward system. Cravings involve dopamine, the neurotransmitter most often associated with reward, motivation, reinforcement, and memories. Dopamine is not simply about pleasure, it helps the brain learn what is worth repeating. Highly palatable foods, especially those combining sugar, refined starch, seed oils, and salt, can strongly activate reward pathways. If those foods become repeatedly associated with comfort, distraction, celebration, relief, or emotional improvements, the brain learns the connection. So over time, the cue alone can trigger the craving. That cue might be a certain time of day. It might be sitting on the couch after dinner. It might be finishing work. It might be loneliness. It might be leaving a medical appointment. It might be receiving difficult news. Or it might simply be the point in the day you reach when your emotional energy is gone. That is one reason cravings can feel so automatic, because the brain has learned when we feel this, we do that. The encouraging news is that learned patterns can be changed. They change through awareness, repetition, replacement, and learning how to meet the underlying need more directly. We also need to understand that poor sleep especially makes cravings stronger. When sleep is short, fragmented, or poor in quality, the body becomes less metabolically resilient. Insulin sensitivity can decrease, hunger hormones shift, emotional regulation becomes more difficult, and the brain's reward response to food becomes stronger. In practical terms, after poor sleep, the body wants more energy, the brain wants more reward, and the part of the brain responsible for planning and impulse control has less capacity available. That is a difficult combination for anyone, but it becomes especially challenging during chronic illness, where sleep is often disrupted by pain, anxiety, medications, blood sugar fluctuations, treatment side effects, or simply the stress of living in an uncertain situation. So if your cravings become stronger after a poor night of sleep, that is not random. The problem is that you're trying to function on a nervous system that never fully recovered from yesterday. Your body is trying to compensate for an energy deficit, a regulation deficit, or both. But not all cravings are about blood sugar, calories, or physiology. Some cravings are about depletion, and specifically emotional depletion. When you are living with chronic or serious illness, the emotional burden can be enormous. Many people don't realize how emotionally depleted they have become until the craving arrives. Food becomes the place where the body asks for comfort, because asking directly for comfort is harder. It's one of the reasons emotional cravings shows up at night. During the day, you're managing appointments, responsibilities, family needs, work demands, and the ongoing performance of coping. But at night, when these distractions disappear, the feelings have more room to surface, so the body reaches for something immediate and familiar, which is comforting. And food has always been connected to comfort, celebration, safety, family, nurturing, and care. But the issue is when food becomes the only available source of comfort, because sometimes your body is not actually asking for food, it's asking for rest or reassurance or connection, or for you to actually experience that grief you've been suppressing, or relief from carrying too much for too long. If cravings have become part of your healing journey, congratulations, you have information. A craving may be saying something like, I need steadier blood sugar, I didn't eat enough earlier, I'm exhausted, I'm stressed and looking for relief. I need comfort. I've been carrying too much. Or I need something to look forward to. If you've listened to our episodes on capacity, protein, sleep, muscle preservation, or stress physiology, you'll notice a familiar theme emerging. The body is constantly sending signals. Symptoms are signals, fatigue is a signal, sleep disruption is a signal, and cravings are signals too. So the challenge is not to eliminate every signal, it's to learn how to interpret it accurately. Because once you understand what that craving is actually asking for, then you can respond more effectively. Here are some practical steps to help you decode and respond to cravings. The first step is to pause long enough to identify the type of craving you're experiencing. Before reaching automatically for food, ask yourself what kind of need might be underneath this. Is it a fuel craving, a stress craving, a fatigue craving, an emotional craving? A fuel craving often comes with urgency, shakiness, weakness, irritability, brain fog, or the feeling that food is needed immediately. A stress craving often appears after pressure, conflict, fear, uncertainty, overstimulation, or a difficult day. A fatigue craving emerges when you're attempting to override or push through exhaustion instead of allowing yourself to rest. And an emotional craving often carries a feeling underneath it. Loneliness, sadness, grief, boredom, frustration, disappointment, or the need to feel cared for. So once you identify the category, respond to the underlying need first. If it's a fuel craving, consider eating something that provides stability rather than only something that provides immediate sugar. Protein, healthy fats, fiber, and carbohydrates together create a more sustained response than sugar or carbohydrates alone. If you are skipping meals, under-eating protein, avoiding large groups of foods, trying to follow an overly rigid healing diet, or simply not consuming enough calories, the body often responds by increasing food thoughts and cravings. The brain is designed to protect you from scarcity, so if it senses that food is becoming unreliable or rare, it increases the drive to seek food. So sometimes the first step in reducing cravings is not more discipline, it's more nourishment. If it's a stress craving, try giving your nervous system a few minutes of support before deciding what to eat. That might mean slowing your breathing, stepping outside, stretching, humming, sitting quietly, or simply putting your feet in the grass and allowing your body to settle. If it is a fatigue craving, the honest answer may be rest, because many people try to use sugar as a substitute for recovery. So finding some time to do something that relaxes you, lets your body and your mind calm down and quiet is essential if you're experiencing this type of craving. If it's an emotional craving, ask yourself what feelings you haven't really faced recently. You might need to journal for a few minutes. You might consider texting or calling a friend. You might pray. You might cry. You might simply acknowledge that feeling instead of trying to push it back down. Often, the intensity of the craving decreases once the underlying emotion has been recognized and honored. The next step is to build meals that prevent predictable cravings. For many people, that means more protein at breakfast, more consistency at lunch, fewer long gaps between meals, and better blood sugar stability through the day. If you consistently crave sugar at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then you need to investigate your breakfast and lunch. If cravings show up every night, ask yourself whether your dinner was satisfying enough and whether your evening routine offers any form of comfort besides food. The third step is to stop making every craving contraband. The more morally charged a food becomes, the stronger the craving often becomes with it. Instead of saying, I can never have this food again, try saying, I can have this, but first I need to understand what my body is asking for. That shifts the conversation from one of deprivation to more of an open-ended investigation. The fourth step is to create what I call a comfort menu. A comfort menu is a list of non-food items, forms of comfort, that are easy to access when you feel depleted. That might include a heating pad, a bath, a favorite blanket, prayer, a calming music playlist, a walk outside, a phone call to a good friend, gentle stretching, a good book, a supportive podcast like this one, or simply 5 quiet minutes with no demands. The goal is to give yourself more than one pathway to relief. And the fifth thing you can do is notice patterns over time. For 1 week, pay attention to, and if you can, journal when cravings happened. Notice what was happening around that craving. What was happening emotionally? How did you sleep? When did you eat last? What did you eat last? What are your stress levels like? What are your energy levels like? Most people discover that their cravings are not at all random. And once you see the pattern, you can intervene much earlier. Finally, if cravings feel compulsive, overwhelming, or connected to binge eating, purging, severe restriction, or significant distress around food, seek support from a qualified professional. You don't have to navigate that alone. Cravings are not proof that you lack discipline. They are signals from a body trying to meet a need, whether it's fuel, steadiness, sleep, comfort, or emotional relief. Your body is not trying to sabotage your healing, it's trying to communicate. And the more you can listen to it, the more you can respond to it. Before you go, if these episodes help you better understand what your body is experiencing, I'd love to stay connected with you beyond the podcast. Each week, I share additional research, healing insights, practical strategies, and resources with my email community, and these things don't always make it into the show. You can join for free at therenegadenutritionist.com because healing is hard enough without trying to figure everything else out alone. Thank you for listening today, and until next time, go be renegades.